So you want to own an AI data center. Let's start there with the dream, because the dream is genuinely intoxicating. Imagine a building. Thousands of the most valuable computing chips on Earth are inside it. Racks and racks of them, each one worth as much as a house. Companies pay you every single hour just for the right to use them. The machines run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never sleeping, never taking a lunch break. There's no storefront, no till, no employee handing over a coffee. Just electricity flowing in one end and computing power flowing out the other, turned directly into revenue. It sounds like the closest thing to printing money that modern capitalism has ever produced. Now forget that picture, because it's wrong, or at least dangerously incomplete. An AI data center isn't a warehouse full of expensive chips quietly generating cash. It's a machine, an enormous interconnected economic machine, and every part of that machine costs money whether or not a single customer shows up. The GPUs lose value the moment you plug them in. The electricity bill arrives whether the racks are busy or empty. The cooling systems hum around the clock, burning power just to stop the building from cooking itself. The hardware you bought last year might already be obsolete. And somewhere, almost certainly, a bank is waiting for its interest payment. So here's the real question, the one this entire story is built around. If you spend hundreds of millions of dollars building one of these facilities, can you actually make your money back? The honest answer is, it depends. It depends on more variables than most people ever imagine. And by the end of this, you'll understand why some of the smartest capital allocators on the planet are, right now, simultaneously the most excited and the most nervous people in the world. Let's go back to the beginning. Before a single customer ever logs in, before a single chip processes a single request, the owner has already spent an extraordinary amount of money. Land, steel, and concrete. Electrical substations and transformers thick enough to power a small town. Backup generators. Fiber connectivity. Networking equipment that has to move enormous amounts of data between racks without becoming the bottleneck itself. Security systems. Permits that can take years to clear. And then, finally, the servers and the GPUs. This is the first shock of data center economics. You are writing enormous checks for years before you earn your first dollar. You are betting with real, borrowed, at-risk capital that the demand for computing power several years from now will be strong enough to justify what you're building today. Nobody hands you a guarantee with the invoice. The concrete gets poured long before anyone knows exactly how the market will look by the time the doors open. Now let's talk about the GPUs, because this is where most people's intuition goes wrong. People think of a GPU as a machine you own. It isn't, not economically. It's an income-producing asset, closer to a hotel room than a piece of furniture. A hotel with 500 rooms doesn't make money because it owns 500 rooms. It makes money when people actually sleep in them. An empty room, however beautifully built, earns nothing. A $10 million machine room doesn't automatically create $10 million of value either. It depends entirely on how intensively that capacity gets used, which brings us to the variable most outsiders never think about. Utilization. Picture two identical data centers, same capital spent, same number of GPUs, same electricity contract. One runs at 85% capacity around the clock. The other, for whatever reason, weak sales, a slow market, poor customer relationships, sits at 40%. On paper, these two facilities look identical. In reality, their economics are nothing alike. One is a thriving business. The other is a very expensive parking lot for silicon. This is the moment most people miss. AI infrastructure isn't really a capacity business. It's a utilization business. Owning the machines is the easy part. Filling them consistently, month after month, is the hard part. Now remember that electricity bill we mentioned earlier, because it never sleeps either. A single high-end GPU can draw around 700 watts under full load. Multiply that by thousands of GPUs running simultaneously, add the cooling systems required to remove the heat they generate, and electricity stops being a background expense. It becomes one of the defining variables in whether the entire facility is profitable at all. And this changes something subtle but important. The best location for a data center isn't necessarily where land is cheapest. It's where power is reliable, abundant, and affordable, which is why so much of this industry's real estate decisions are, underneath it all, energy decisions in disguise. Then there's the heat itself. Nearly all the electricity flowing into a dense AI cluster eventually becomes heat, and that heat has to go somewhere. Picture packing thousands of high-performance engines into one room and then trying to stop that room from overheating. That's effectively what modern liquid-cooled AI facilities are solving for, and the more computationally dense the racks become, the more sophisticated and expensive that cooling problem gets. Notice what just happened. We haven't even reached revenue yet, and the list of ways to lose money has already grown long. Now flip the lens. Instead of asking what the data center costs, ask how it actually makes money. Customers pay, in effect, for GPU hours. Available capacity multiplied by utilization, multiplied by the price charged per hour. Today, a single high-end GPU can cost anywhere from $25,000 to over $40,000 to purchase outright, while renting equivalent capacity in the cloud might run somewhere between $2 and $7 an hour. That gap between the enormous upfront cost and the comparatively modest hourly price is exactly why utilization matters so much. The infrastructure only earns its keep across thousands and thousands of hours of paid use, hour after hour, for years. Let's do the rough math, purely as an illustration. Imagine a facility that costs several $100 million to build, filled with thousands of GPUs, running at a healthy utilization rate, charging a competitive hourly rate. Even in an optimistic scenario, it can take years of near-continuous operation just to recover the original investment before a single cent of profit is booked. This is illustrative, not a real industry figure, but the lesson holds regardless of the exact numbers. Owning the infrastructure and making money from the infrastructure are two very different achievements. Remember that gap. It's about to matter even more, because here's where the story gets genuinely strange. A GPU doesn't have to break to lose its value. It can become economically obsolete while still working perfectly. A newer chip generation arrives with more performance, better efficiency, lower cost per computation, and suddenly customers would rather rent the new machine than the old one, even though the old one runs just fine. The owner isn't racing against wear and tear. They're racing against the pace of technological progress itself. The machine doesn't have to fail for the economics to stop working. Allow us onto the question of financing. Very few of these facilities are built entirely with cash. Much of the capital comes from a mix of equity, debt, and long-term contracts with the customers who will eventually fill the racks. And debt doesn't care about utilization. If demand slows, if prices soften, if a facility runs half empty for a quarter, the interest payments still arrive on schedule every month, regardless of how the racks are performing. Leverage is a magnifier. It can turn a good year into a spectacular one, and a bad year into a genuine crisis. Interest rates, of all things, quietly decide how forgiving or unforgiving that math turns out to be. Zoom them out further, and you'll see the whole industry moving through a familiar cycle. Demand for compute surges, capital floods in to build new capacity. That new capacity eventually outpaces demand, prices come under pressure, returns compress, and the cycle resets. It's part of why Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Meta are together planning to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $700 billion combined on this kind of infrastructure in a single year. A figure that would have sounded absurd only a few years ago. They're racing to secure capacity before the next competitor does, fully aware that oversupply is the natural enemy of pricing power. Specialized players like CoreWeave and Oracle have built entire businesses on exactly this bet, leasing capacity to AI labs that would rather rent computing power than build and finance it themselves. And often, the real bottleneck isn't chips at all. It's power, it's land, it's transformers and grid connections that can take years to secure, longer than it takes to manufacture the chips themselves. The company that owns the most GPUs isn't automatically the winner. The winner is often whoever can lock in cheap, reliable power and turn it into usable capacity the fastest. Which leads to the final question worth asking. If owning this infrastructure is this capital-intensive, this leveraged, this exposed to obsolescence, why not just rent compute from someone else instead? Ownership makes sense when demand is predictable, utilization is high, and power is secured on favorable terms. Renting makes more sense when the future is uncertain, when demand could shift faster than a building can be constructed. Increasingly, this isn't really a technology decision at all. It's a decision about how much risk you're willing to own and for how long, because that, in the end, is what this whole story has really been about. Not GPUs, not electricity, not even artificial intelligence. It's about what it means to own a productive asset, one that only creates wealth when it's used, and used well. When utilization is high, power is cheap, and the technology stays competitive, ownership can create extraordinary fortunes. But strip away any one of those conditions, and the very same machine, sitting in the very same building, can become a very expensive way to lose money. The most valuable assets were never simply the most expensive ones. They're the ones that can keep turning capital into cash flow, again and again, without ever stopping.